minutes. So welcome, and I'm just going to move the slide here. Okay, so this is our Citizen Science Alberta Community Practice meeting number 6. And so we started this community practice in 2021, and we're growing our numbers. And I think today we had the most people sign up that we've had since we began. So that's a good sign. So welcome and thank you for joining us today. What we have prepared today is a community practice meeting about wading through aquatic projects. So we have had many different topics, and this specific topic we thought we would focus a little bit on water, since we're getting into hopefully spring soon, although we are in our first false spring, I think, in Alberta, where we had a lot of snow here in Edmonton. But we're getting ready to start our water projects and moving into spring citizen science projects. So we thought we would highlight some of those projects. We're gonna today we're gonna look at 5 different projects, and we'll do quick overview presentations, and then we're gonna go into breakout rooms where you'll be able to ask the expert. We're gonna try a little bit of a different model today. So as many of you are aware, we usually try and do a little bit of a demographic, so we understand a little bit who's here and who we're meeting, and trying to build that network. And so if you go on to Mentimeter, you can, I'm going to just move this screen over. Oh, people are already starting to go on, so that's great. Okay, I'm starting to see it. I'm going to move this over here so we can see it. All right, so we've got lots of nonprofits, some government, academic institutions, a little bit of industry. So we've got quite a variety here, but with more than about half of the people are from nonprofits. Okay, just give it a couple more seconds while people sign on.
What's the code again?
Oh. There you go. Can I get one of the steering committee members to put that in the chat for us, please, just so that everyone, it's permanent.
Brad put it in there.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I can't see the chat when I'm in this mode, so appreciate it. All right. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. The next one is your primary area of focus. So we're focusing a bit on water today, but the principles are the same for all the projects when we're putting together projects. So curious to see. Oh, we do have a lot of water people here, as we would have expected. A little bit of biodiversity, always lots of others, and I'm assuming that that's because you work in multiple of these areas. It's hard to split it up. All right, seeing some biodiversity. No air people and no climate people. Not yet. Okay, perfect. Okay, well, thanks everybody, and we'll start moving on through our presentations. It's always just interesting to know. This will stay open, so if you want to keep adding it in, that would be great. Okay, so I just wanted to, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this community of practice, like I said, it was started in 2021. And the intention was that we would create a space for groups and individuals and organizations from across Alberta to be able to work together and advance citizen science in Alberta. And one of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to be able to promote and showcase a lot of the projects that are happening here in Alberta, which we're going to be doing today for some of the water projects. We wanted to connect learning to action. So what are we learning and how can other practitioners implement it? And we want to elevate the profile of citizen science in Alberta. And the other piece that we want to do is we wanted to foster collaboration. And then, so one of the exciting things that many of you have participated in was last year we did a visioning for a collaboration hub. So a space where this community could get together and virtually and potentially in person eventually and learn from each other. And that work has gone forward. We had some workshops, we got input from lots of people, and this year we're going to be starting the implementation of that. So that's really great. And the steering committee, which I'll talk about a little bit more, is going to be helping to guide that process. So on the steering committee, we have Colin King from Inside Education, Tracy Lee, a lot of them are on the call today, from Stacky, myself from the Office of the Chief Scientist, Bradley Peter from Alberta Lake Management Society, Catherine Pierce from Battle River Watershed Alliance, Justine Topin from Alberta Environment and Protected Areas, as well as Christine Treblett. And we've added 3 new members to our steering committee since our last meeting, which is they will be speaking. So we have today Carson Benigard from the Pigeon Lake Watershed Association, Caitlin McNabb, also from Alberta Environment and Protected Areas, and Stephanie Weisenbach from Nature Alberta. So today I'm just doing this quick meeting overview, and in a couple minutes we'll get right into the topics at hand today. So we have 5 panel speakers. And we're trying a new format today, so hopefully it will work. And we'll be able to collaborate together. So our 5 speakers, we have Elliot Lindsay, who is joining us from Trout Unlimited. He's going to be talking a little bit about fish and citizen science. Carson is going to be telling us a little bit about the community lake observers. Bradley Peter is going to talk about lake monitoring. We have Kendra Forbes here from the Battle River Watershed Alliance, who's going to talk about the Extreme Science project. And then we also have Lindsay Day from DataStream, who's going to be talking about open data sharing with DataStream. And once we have those kind of 5-minute brief overviews, then we're going to go into breakout rooms. And with Zoom, there's a feature where you're able to self-select which table you would like to go to to ask the expert. So you'll be able to move around to the different tables as you please, and as to ask your different questions. So the Ask the Expert breakout sessions, I told all the presenters that I had floating head pictures of them sitting at tables. So here, this is the floating head pictures. So we have at the first table, we have Elliot, who's going to be talking about getting a project started. At the second table, we're going to have Carson, who's going to be answering questions and talking about engaging volunteers. The third table, we have Bradley Peter, who's going to be talking about getting ready for the field and the different training aspects. The fourth table will be project supplies and logistics, where we'll have Kendra. And the fifth table will be data management. So all your questions about data management, which will be hosted by Lindsay. So that's, well, I think we can just get right into this. Oh, I'll go back to that after. I'm just going to stop sharing here. Oh. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, so I'm going to introduce our first speaker, and then Elliot, you can start sharing your screen. So Elliot is from Trout Unlimited, and he is an implementation biologist and has been involved with Trout Unlimited since October of 2012, where he was first hired as a fish rescue technician. He was born and raised in Calgary, and Elliot loves fish and water and working with volunteers and stewardship groups to implement habitat rehabilitation projects throughout Western Canada. Outside of work, Elliot enjoys river snorkeling. We'll have to hear a little bit more about that. Playing dodgeball and recently competing in the 2022 Dodgeball Canadian Nationals tournament. So over to you, Elliot.
Thanks. Just double checking. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay, great. So, and you can see my screen?
Perfect.
All right, 2 for 2. Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity. My name is Elliot and I work with Trout Unlimited Canada, and I'm going to do a super quick 5-minute kind of crash to hopefully inspire you about citizen science relating to water and fish. So first of all, who are we? Trout Unlimited Canada, we are a national organization. We have 2 offices, one in Calgary and one in Guelph. And we're supported by a broad base of our members, volunteers, supporters, and partners, many of whom are on this call right now. So I'm happy to see some familiar names and faces. So I'm kind of just going to talk about 2, I guess, like kind of juicy citizen science opportunities for water and fish. And the first one is stream temperature monitoring. So this is appealing, I think, to citizen science practitioners because the devices that you need to measure stream temperature are pretty cheap. They're very user-friendly. They're very durable. They're easy to install. They last for a really long time, like about 5 years or more. And they collect some really like fundamental data that's important for the management of aquatic resources. If you kind of think of like the key ingredients for aquatic health, there's like flow, obviously water, and stream temperature. Those are 2 of like the master variables. So getting information on one of those 2 is relatively simple for anyone to do. And you get some cool outputs. So you can look at differences between sites. So each of these panels, each of these horizontal panels is a site. And the x-axis is over the year. So you can just kind of visually see that, oh, there's some, at the top site, it's getting pretty warm in July, August. That's some of the reddish colored part of the graph. And then the middle site staying cold pretty much all year. So that information gives you some clues that you can look into what might be causing some of these differences. There's things you can learn about at the reach scale. So at like a bigger scale than just a site, like a whole section of stream, you can look at, this is 9 different sites. So you can make comparisons between, and then you can use the data to look at like an entire watershed. So this is the Tay River watershed. And basically you can see that some of the sites are below the maximum temperature threshold for bull trout during the summer. And bull trout are thermally sensitive fish. They really like cold water. And then a couple of sites are above that threshold. So again, it's kind of like giving you clues as to where you can look a little bit closer at making some changes. And there might be some volunteer opportunities associated with that as well. And then you can scale it right up to like the whole country or even like a big region. So this is a cool project out of the Northwestern US, and it's basically just looking at stream temperatures and visualizing them in like a color scheme that the eye can quickly pick out where the cold water habitats are and where the warm water habitats are. And then I'm just gonna do some analog here and switch to my internet browser and show you a cool opportunity that we aren't doing in Alberta, but I think we reasonably could. This is a stream biomonitoring program that's undertaken in Costa Rica, and it's entirely citizen science driven, and it is relying on volunteer river snorkelers. So it's combining like the greatest hobby ever as well with science, and they produce these guides for fish species. People are trained, and then they just go and crawl around and swim in their local creeks, and they collect some standardized data on what lives there, and it feeds into like a watershed scale or basin scale health assessment of streams in the Atlantic slope of Costa Rica. So yeah, I was pretty fortunate to get to help out with some of this last winter. I'm not sure how much help I was. I don't really speak very good Spanish, and I had to learn all these fish IDs on the fly, but it really kind of planted the seed of like, oh, I mean, this is like, we could do this. So anyway, I'm planting that seed right now. And yeah, I'm going to wrap it up with that. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Elliot. And next, we're going to move on to Carson Renegard. And Carson is the general manager of the Pigeon Lake Watershed Association, a not-for-profit environmental advocacy group whose mission is to enhance, preserve, and protect Pigeon Lake and its watershed as a healthy and environmentally sustainable ecosystem for current and future generations. So they work to collect data about the health of the lake and the watershed to engage residents in lake stewardship. And citizen science projects fulfill both these goals as residents observe changes in their shorelines, measure water clarity, and monitor for invasive species. So over to you, Carson.
Thank you, Ashley. So yeah, thank you for having me here. It's nice to see you all. I see there's at least one Pigeon Lake resident in the group, so thanks for coming. For those of you who don't know, Pigeon Lake is a lake. It's west of Wetaskiwin, about half an hour. It's very recreationally active, lots of cottages, and also some important biodiversity areas. So we work to protect that, to keep the lake and the watershed healthy for the animals and other organisms, and for continued recreation of a healthy lake as well. So we educate residents, advocate for environmental policies, respond to development applications, do fun activities for kids in summer camps, and also, of course, collecting environmental data about the health of the lake and watershed, including with our citizen science programs. So last summer, as part of an Alberta Community Partnership Grant, thanks to the Government of Alberta and the Summer Village of Grandview, by the way, we were able to expand our citizen science programs and start a whole bunch of new ones. So this here is a page from our website with all of the projects we have ongoing or that we contribute to, such as the Winter Lake Keepers is Alms, or there's iNaturalist and eBird, or the apps that you can use. But the one I'm going to talk about today is LakeObserver there. So I'm going to go over what it is, how and why we designed it, and then our volunteer management for it. So LakeObserver is a program designed for citizen scientists. In this case, it's mostly cottage residents at Pigeon Lake. They go out and record lake and water quality observations. We ask them to go out once a month, either for the entire year or just in the summer months, which is all that some people are there for. And they just go out on their shoreline or on their dock at any time that's convenient to them, and they fill out this data sheet here, which is available as part of a training book that we give them, or for a Google form for those of you that prefer to do it online. So don't worry about reading that, it's a little small, but I'll go over that. We ask them to write observations on water quality. So if it's clear, if there's cloudy, algae, fish kills, the water level, whether that's higher or normal than usual, the condition of their shoreline, if there's vegetation or renaturalization, algae residue, erosion or undercutting, also ice heaves in the winter, invasive plants, so things like Himalayan balsam, flowering rush, common tansy, oxeye daisy, all those good things. And then invasive aquatic species, such as the zebra arquega mussels, goldfish, water milfoil. Luckily, we don't have any of those yet, but it's good to keep an eye out. And then also for extreme weather events like flooding, heat domes, major storms or droughts, and then also the ice conditions, so the ice on and off dates and the thickness. So they do this and send it in to us, and we get the responses and put it into a spreadsheet here. So this one is from July last summer, which is when we had the most responses. And you can see one of the main things that people are saying is that the water level was high or extremely high, and that there's also been lots of rain and storms this month, which is neat, and we can corroborate that with the weather data, because how we use this information is that it's not, this is obviously a pretty subjective observation in a small sample size, so we're not trying to use LakeObserver for robust data collection, not on its own, but it's mostly about getting people involved in thinking about lake health, doing their own observations. But we also can use the data to compare it to other data being collected by the Government of Alberta, by the Alberta Lake Management Society. So these observations can help us see how the actual data collected by those groups matches up with what people are seeing. So for this example, water level is always a hot topic around the lake, and it causes issues like erosion and ice heaves. But those issues vary a lot by where you are on the lake and people's own personal concerns. So we can compare their observations with say, the provincial water level data and see how the actual levels compare with what people are seeing and what concerns they have. Now getting into the final part here, which is how we recruit and manage our community scientists for this program. And for some people, it was really easy to get them involved because there's always been people around the lake who have been keeping track of things on their own and letting the Pigeon Lake watershed know about what they see going on the lake and what their concerns are if something changed. So that was even the inspiration for this project. And we wanted to turn it into a bigger citizen science project and get more people involved in thinking about lake health. So last summer, we drafted up this project with lots of input from our partners to see what data we should be collecting. And we started including the advertisements in our social media and newsletters, at events, farmers markets, council meetings. We were aiming to get at least one person from each community around the lake. We're currently at 11 volunteers, so it's still a small program, but we're hoping to keep on growing it because we hope that people will, get involved in this, get others interested in it, and be able to talk about these things. And not just collecting data for the sake of data, but thinking about lake health and influencing their stewardship actions. For managing the volunteers, we send out a monthly email just reminding them to do their observations for the month, including the attachment of the data sheet and a link to the form. So hopefully makes it easy for them to get the email, go out, spend 5 minutes checking their lakefront, and then make the observations and send them back to us. Then once we have the information together, we summarize last month's results and thank them for participating, of course. And that's our LakeObserver program. So thank you for having me here, and I'll be happy to talk more about our volunteer management in one of the breakout rooms.
Excellent. Thank you, Carson. And next up, we have Bradley Peter. So Bradley is the Executive Director of the Alberta Lake Management Society. He spent the last 12 years working with community-based monitoring of Alberta lakes. He's also a member of our Alberta Citizen Science Community of Practice Steering Committee. So over to you, Bradley.
Thanks, Ashley. Okay, so yeah, my presentation is going to focus more on the training and safety components of aquatic citizen science programs and the way that we do that with our lake monitoring efforts. So the Alberta Lake Management Society runs a number of community-based monitoring programs across the province. We have our LakeWatch program, which has been operating for over 25 years now, collecting long-term water quality data from lakes across the province, including on a special provincial lake monitoring program. We also have our Lake Keepers program, which is running in both the summer and winter months. That's seeing volunteers going out and doing almost 200 sampling events a year, most of those occurring in the winter season. We have a recreational water monitoring program, which is collecting data from public beach areas to inform public health advisories related to cyanobacteria or enterococcus. And we also have an Indigenous community-based monitoring program, which operates in the oil sands region. So we've got a number of different projects kind of happening across the province. And if any of that interests you, then we certainly encourage you to reach out to us. Safety considerations obviously are a huge component of our programs, especially being out on the boat or out on the ice in the winter time. So how do we try our best to manage this? One thing is that all of our volunteers or participants complete informed consent forms. And I'm not an insurance specialist or a lawyer or anything, but my understanding is that you really can never fully waive liability as a coordinator running these programs. But certainly you can take steps to demonstrate that your volunteers or participants are informed and educated and equipped to safely complete the tasks that they've taken on. So for example, our volunteer informed consent form here allows us to capture some information like emergency contact info, describe some of the hazards that volunteers might or participants might encounter. We also have on the back a description of what is your role as a participant and what is our role as staff. And this really covers things like personal safety, but also responsibilities around using your own property or equipment in participating in the program. So I think these are a good idea to have for any program where you have participants putting themselves at risk. In the winter, there are a totally different set of hazards. We have Kirsten here wielding an ice saw out on the ice. What could possibly go wrong? A million things. So our participants in the winter program are completing an ice safety quiz. We set this up just as a Google form. So before you're allowed to participate, you have to complete the quiz and you have to get 100% on the quiz. So the quiz is going through things like general safety out on the ice. How do you extract yourself from the water if you happen to fall through the ice? Things like this. So we're demonstrating that our participants understand how to be safe on the ice. We also provide an accompanying ice safety guide. So we're doing our due diligence here. They're also completing an informed consent form as well. Before our staff go out into the field, we're completing what we call a field level risk assessment. Again, this is something you might want to consider adding into your own program. In our case, this includes a checklist of possible hazards out in the field, but also it's allowing us to identify new hazards and saying how we're going to control them. So oftentimes it might be as simple as it's a really hot day out, we're going to bring extra water and we're going to cut our trip off after 2 hours. And so it's just demonstrating that we've assessed the hazards on a daily basis and we've identified if we can safely control them. So this is done every single day, but then twice a year, we're also completing what we call a task hazard assessment and control. And this is an exercise, kind of a sit-down exercise where you go through every single hazard presented by your job and you identify the severity of that hazard, the likelihood of it happening, and that provides you with the overall risk. So putting controls in place allows you to reduce your severity or likelihood and your overall risk with the hazard. So we're doing this before each summer season and before each winter season, just in case we've introduced new equipment or new procedures that we think we need to reassess in terms of their risk. When it comes to training, we still are a big fan of paper training manuals. These are handy because you can bring them into the field. We post them all onto our website. So if you don't have internet, print them out before you go into the field. And when you're out there, you can always reference this to make sure you're doing things properly. Definitely make sure it goes step by step. Use a lot of photos in the guides and test it on people who don't know the procedures or the equipment. I think it's easy to take for granted what we already know about a program, and we kind of fill in those gaps automatically, but your participants might not. So make sure you test this on folks who aren't familiar with the work. And then we're also a big fan of training videos. So we've developed training videos that are all on YouTube. For example, this is the training video accompanying our recreational water program, cyanobacteria monitoring procedures. And the software that we use for this is called Video Leap. Video Leap is great, lets you put in video clips, voiceovers, images, animations, all that good stuff. And you can even build it off of your phone. So we've had a lot of good success with Video Leap and our training videos. And with that, I'll leave it there, but I'm happy to answer all of your questions related to any of this in the breakout session.
Great, thank you, Brad. That was very interesting. Okay, up next, we have Kendra Forbes, who's with the Battle River Watershed Alliance. And she's going to be speaking to us about extreme science. She is the education lead with Battle River out of Camrose. And it's one of the 11 watershed planning and advisory councils in Alberta. And it's known for their strong youth education that's focused on providing hands-on learning and helping to connect students to place. So she'll be presenting on a program that's offered for grades 7 to 12 and how it's evolving. So over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This program is a program that's been around for quite a few years. It was developed earlier on by my predecessor, Natalie, who I was looking. She is not on this call, she said she might be, as well as Joey at the Red Deer River Watershed. So the two of them, and I believe some other partners, kind of based this off cabin training, which is the Canadian Aquatic biodiversity. Oh, Sophie would know. If anyone doesn't know what the cabin training is, so basically it's looking at a lot of that aquatic monitoring, and they do training on that. So this was kind of a way to make that science make sense for high school students. And so the biggest part of this was wanting to give like a good in-depth field study that can connect to environmental chemistry for grade 9, freshwater systems for grade 8, as well as some of the higher level biology courses in high school, and give them a chance to actually get out, do experiential learning, and learn about stewardship, and give them kind of a holistic look at how aquatic monitoring happens. So you see there some of our fun critters and some students that we full on put them in waders and put them in the water. So these are the parameters that we test for. So what takes up the most amount of time when we do this field study is the benthic macroinvertebrates. So usually before doing this field trip, I do an in-class presentation with including a safety video, and that we had developed by CSL students from Augustana, talking about what they can expect and how watersheds work, and then touching on why we're monitoring for benthic macroinvertebrates and why they're important as indicators. And when we do the field portion, that does take up the majority of the time, is that's putting them in. They get assigned a transect for their group. They go in at the DNet, they go in at the waders and collect for a certain amount of time in their transect. But while they're waiting, because teenagers are so patient, we usually get them to work on a clipboard with the riparian area information. So looking around them, what are the land uses in their area there? Are we in a park? Are we, in a residential area? What are the land uses surrounding that area that might impact what we find in the water? So getting them to do that while they wait. I usually also have another member of my team going around with a turbidity tube and getting the group to look at that and collect that data as well while they wait. And then at the very end, we pull out a YSI meter and look at temperature, conductivity, as well as the pH and the dissolved oxygen. And I know there is extensions we could do where we could also be testing for that nitrogen and phosphate, but we find that just for the amount of time that we have, we end up being a bit limited on our ability to do that. And so it is something that we can definitely expand on, but for the time that we end up doing it, covering these main aspects usually takes up most of our time in the field. But we want to make it citizen science. So collecting that data and following that structure of system, we're hoping to, standardize how it's collected so that way we can use the data. So this is just an example of our stream science map. And so where we've done our sampling throughout our watershed over the years, you can see this one was in 2018 probably near Fabian, near the bridge there. And we can input that data. Ideally, it's nice if the students can do it as a follow-up activity, where they can do it in class, where they do the data analysis themselves and with their teacher, and then input it into the system. But it's harder because we're at the end of the year and teachers usually just want a nice fun field experience. So it's a little bit trickier sometimes to get that follow-up, but that's something that we can work on. And it might just be something I have summer students do this year, is input a lot of that data that hasn't made it in, but we've been trying to record that over the years so that if teachers and students did want to do a more in-depth look, they can compare the results over the years. And so I decided to do what's in the box. This is a mix of obviously kind of nice expensive field gear, but also Dollarama stuff. So turkey basters and Dollarama work great. Serving spoons, Carson and I got a lot of weird looks at Dollar Tree last year for buying like 40 serving spoons. The lady was trying to figure out if we were in catering or something. Ice cube trays, white buckets, and then of course the turbidity tube we ordered separately, YSI separate, DNet, but a lot of that stuff that you see in that picture is easy in that way. There's enough for each kid to kind of be involved as well. We've got the sifters for them to sort of sift out the stuff from their nets. And that's kind of what our kit looks like when we're on the go. I will also highlight on the other side there our wader rack. So I stole this from Glynis at Augustana. We did a tour when I had the watershed education outreach staff here last spring. We just went to tour the McLawn Research Station and I saw that and I was like, I need it. It's much better than that box you see at the bottom is usually where they get stored. And when kids, there are other kids who jump in the water and waders, because that never happens. It's nice to have a better system for drying. So if anyone wants a spec for that, literally if you have anyone in your life that has any sort of woodworking skill, it is a very easy project to do, and I am absolutely in love with it. It's made my life so much easier. So next step, I've seen a couple of you people are on here. Lesser Slave, Beaver River, so Leica and Old Man has started offering this program as well. As well as I think Ashley in Athabasca is doing a variation, as well as Police Point Interpretive Center in Medicine Hat is also pursuing if they can do some sort of field study like this. So as that kind of builds, we're trying to build better resources for teachers, kind of upgrade the program a little bit and evolve it as things have changed and as we've practiced it for so many years. And my nice segue over to Lindsay is another step we're working on right now. I believe Sophie's been in touch, is working on if more watersheds are doing it outside of just Battle River, then maybe we start having this data stored on a larger scale. So instead of just on my Google map on our website, looking at maybe if all different watersheds are doing it, using the same practices, the same methodology, maybe we start storing it on DataStream. So that is my segue over to Lindsay to talk about DataStream, but that is hopefully one of our next steps for this program.
Great, thank you so much, Kendra. And with that, the perfect segue over to the next presentation is Lindsay Day, who's the program director for DataStream at the Gordon Foundation. In this role, she works with communities, governments, researchers, and other collaborators to continually grow and improve DataStream. It's an online open access platform for sharing water quality data in Canada. And I think many of you are very familiar with it and use it. So Lindsay has a background in health and science communications and is passionate about working with others to improve how we live with and care for water in Canada. So over to you, Lindsay.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. And thanks, Kendra, for the perfect handover. So just to start with a little bit of background, I work on DataStream. I work for the Gordon Foundation. And the Gordon Foundation is a 55-year-old charity with a long-standing commitment to protecting fresh water in Canada. And as I said, I work on DataStream, and our mission broadly is to promote knowledge sharing and support collaborative water stewardship so our waters remain healthy for generations to come. One of the core pieces of our programming with DataStream is obviously the open data platform. And you can see it pictured there. I'll do a quick little demo at the end if there's time. And it's free and open for anybody to use. And our focus is specifically on water quality data. So the sort of physical, chemical parameters that folks are measuring, the common field measures like temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, those kinds of things, and then basically anything that you can measure in a sample that you sent to the lab. So thousands of different parameters. So in terms of where things got started, the foundation has a long history of also working in the north and including the Mackenzie River Basin pictured here. And so when the foundation was sort of looking at what role can we play, and I should say like the foundation typically was more of a policy oriented organization. And so we're looking at how can we support better water stewardship decisions in the Mackenzie Basin. It's a really ecologically important drainage basin and also socially and culturally important as well. And so through some of that scoping work and convening of experts, sort of three key findings came out. And one was that it was really difficult to get the data to make good decisions. Sometimes that data might not exist, but oftentimes it did exist. It was just difficult to find and access. The other finding was that any sort of efforts really needed to be transboundary in nature. As you can see here, the basin spans 6 provinces and territories. And then lastly, that communities needed to be involved. Communities really care about their local waterways, as you folks know, like are best suited to sort of understand and see local changes. And so any sort of efforts needed to include community engagement as well. So we ended up partnering with the government of the Northwest Territories. They were Mackenzie DataStream's founding partner, and we built this open data platform. Oops. Here we go. So like I said, it's free and open for anybody to use, and it's a place for people who want to share their results publicly in open formats, and it's all standardized, which makes it much easier to use on the other end. And it also, we have sort of map-based and data visualization tools that make it easier to sort of search and explore. So DataStream today, obviously, the challenge was not unique to the Mackenzie River Basin, and so we now operate across 4 major drainage basins in Canada, and Pacific there in orange is sort of in development at the moment, so soon to be 5 major drainage basins. And we work with over 240 different monitoring groups across the country, a lot of community-based monitoring groups. Obviously, that was sort of part of the impetus of why we built DataStream. But increasingly, we also work with governments as well, so sharing large, long-term government data sets, which is super helpful. As well as academic researchers and others who are collecting water quality data. So this is sort of the perennial challenge, and it exists across the country. And I think it exists whether, you know, it's a small community monitoring citizen science group or for governments. Everybody is faced with this challenge of how do we manage well all the different water quality data that's being collected. And I mean, sometimes it's stored in different places, in different formats. It can be vulnerable to getting lost over time, or pieces of information might get lost. You know, those pieces of information might exist in somebody's brain or on their hard drive, and then people move on. And so, you know, the longer ago the data was collected, often the harder it is to fill in those missing pieces. And I often cite, there was a study in the US that looked at 100 years worth of nutrient water quality data. It was collected by governments, tribal associations, community groups, and others. And of all that data, over half of it couldn't be reused because it had missing or ambiguous information. And that was valued at about $12 billion US. So the challenge, the struggle is real. And DataStream, we give a lot of thought about how data comes in and is structured and ensure that it is there over the long term, and that it is in a standardized format that reduces ambiguity. And so in terms of where we sort of see ourselves fitting in, we don't get involved in the data collection. We work with groups that are doing that and have that kind of expertise. So we don't collect or fund or own any water quality data. What we do is provide a place for folks that want to share it publicly, a place to publish that information in standardized formats, where it can be served up in sort of both human readable and accessible formats, as well as machine readable and accessible. So that's really important. So it can feed into this sort of data analysis and interpretation, which again is not a piece that we participate in, but aim to help contribute to that so that it can inform policy and action. So I'm just going to show you really quickly for those who aren't familiar with the site, because I think it's always really helpful to just sort of see what I'm talking about. So like I mentioned, there are these, we have these regional hubs. I'm always challenged on Zoom because you have like all these different pieces in the way, but this is Mackenzie DataStream. You see there on the map, each of these circles represents monitoring sites, and as you zoom in, you can click on them and see this belongs to this data set and click through that way. This is Lake Winnipeg Basin. So you can see Alberta has pretty good coverage between those two platforms. And you can filter by region. So you could say Alberta, and then you'll see all the data sets that are collected in Alberta. And I will jump into one. I was going to show Lake Keepers since OMS is here on the call. So on the left-hand side, you see these are all the locations that are part of that monitoring program. I'm just going to select all, even though I know it kind of maxes out the visualizer there. To find out more information about the program, this is sort of who, like the folks involved and the description of the program, when the data set was last updated, all that kind of information, a DOI, which is a link that'll never break. And then on the visualizer side, we're plotting temperature right now, just by default. And as you scroll over, you can see the results. But you can also plot anything that is collected in the data set. So there's quite a long list here. And where CCME guidelines exist, so those are national guidelines for the protection of aquatic life, it'll plot those. So that's really helpful to just get like a quick sense of how things are looking. So as you can see here, pH is falling within the expected ranges most of the time. And we have some science explainer material too to help make this accessible to others. So this explains for pH, you know, what it is, why does it matter, and the common ways that it's measured. So that's it in a nutshell, and I will leave it there because I know we're focused on 5-minute presentations. But I will be in a breakout session talking about data management best practices and open data sharing. So happy to answer questions there.
Great, thank you so much, Lindsay, and thank you to all of the presenters today. I really found each one fascinating in their own way, and I have lots of questions, and I hope that the audience does as well, because we're going to be moving into our next phase of the program, which is our Ask the Expert tables. And so